As they made their way toward the subterranean palace, Lin Yi caught sight of a jarring anomaly. Up until now, the village inhabitants they'd encountered were mostly middle-aged, none appearing older than 40 or 50. A truly elderly face had been a missing piece in this twisted community. It seemed the freak's illusions had frozen them in time, eternal life granted at the moment they consumed that cursed meat. But with his vision sharpened, Lin Yi now saw the truth. The village was crawling with the aged. Hunched figures moved with a sluggish, desperate urgency, their clouded eyes fixed on the fleeing sacrifices. They clawed at the runners, only to be shoved aside and trampled into the dirt. One sacrifice suddenly turned, pouncing on an old man and tearing into him with primal hunger. As the man collapsed, a blur of motion vanished into the earth beneath him. Could that be the burrowing freak Chu Lai warned us about? Lin Yi wondered.
Eyes forward, we need to keep moving.
Chu Lai stepped into Lin Yi's line of sight, his torchlight flickering as he pressed them onward.
If the guards spot this light, they'll be on us in seconds. We can't afford a delay.
Lin Yi's brow furrowed. Chu Lai seemed to have expected this carnage. Perhaps the release of the sacrifices had been a calculated distraction all along. Regardless of the intent, the spreading chaos was providing the perfect cover for their escape. The group navigated the twisting tunnels until the shadows gave way to the sprawling grandeur of the subterranean palace. Zhang Cheng stood frozen, his eyes wide as he took in the impossible architecture carved into the heart of the earth.
Unbelievable. In the surface world, people would pay a fortune just to step foot in a place like this. I'd give anything for a camera right now.
Stare all you want.
Chu Lai glanced over his shoulder, his expression unreadable in the dim light.
But the next part is personal. I'm going to get my mother. I can handle it from here.
Despite his offer of independence, his hands remained clamped tightly around the shoulders of the two children. The kids had witnessed the chaos in the village after the torches were lit, and the memory clearly haunted them. They didn't have Chu Kai's sharpened senses, but they understood enough to know the village was in its death throes. The young girl was a mess of nerves, her small frame vibrating with uncontrolled terror. Her companion tried to offer some comfort, but his own fear made his words come out in ragged, broken fragments.
I'm coming with you.
Lin Yi's brow creased with concern. The idea of letting Chu Lai wander off on his own didn't sit right with him. Zhang Cheng didn't object, figuring Lin Yi's presence would keep things under control while he admired the scenery. Not wanting to leave Zhang Cheng unprotected in case the villagers followed, Lin Yi motioned for Chu Kai to remain as a guard.
Fine, but move. We're burning daylight we don't have.
Chu Lai gestured impatiently toward the inner chambers.
If we miss our window, there won't be another chance.
Something about Chu Lai's tone gave Lin Yi pause, a flicker of something that sounded dangerously like excitement. He tried to convince himself it was just the thrill of their impending escape, but the feeling lingered. Chu Lai's grip never wavered as he guided the two children toward the side hall, his pace brisk and determined. Lin Yi followed just steps behind, his senses sharp as they moved deeper into the palace's side chambers. Zhang Cheng wasn't about to waste these final moments. He was determined to commit the palace's intricate beauty to memory, knowing they'd likely never return.
Chu Kai, get a load of this! The detail on these carvings is absolutely mind-blowing.
He reached out, his fingers tracing the ancient patterns etched into the stone walls. Chu Kai grabbed Zhang Cheng's arm, pulling him back with a sharp, no-nonsense yank.
Stay focused. We're in the middle of an escape, and you're treating it like a museum tour. Get your head in the game.
Chu Kai had zero patience for historical aesthetics, unable to fathom the wonder Zhang Cheng was experiencing. But as Zhang Cheng's eyes wandered, his expression shifted from awe to a dawning suspicion.
Wait a second. Lin Yi and the others, they headed for the side hall, right?
He glanced back toward the passage they had just taken, then turned his gaze toward the imposing main hall looming ahead.
Something doesn't add up. Why would they go to the side hall instead of the main one?
Because the imperial noble consort is in the side hall. It's not complicated.
Chu Kai shrugged, dismissive of Zhang Cheng's sudden doubt.
The main hall is where they keep the freaks locked up. You really want to waltz in there and serve yourself up as a snack?
I don't buy it.
Zhang Cheng's features hardened, his tone taking on a scholarly gravity.
The ancients were obsessed with hierarchy and protocol. If Chulai's mother really was the imperial noble consort, she would never have accepted a side chamber. It's a calculated insult to her rank.
Chu Kai started to protest, but Zhang Cheng raised a hand, cutting him off before he could speak.
Think about the records. Huan was brought here as the consort's child, but the emperor never recognized him. He had no official status, no claim to the throne. An unrecognized child doesn't get to live in the palace proper, let alone be enshrined in the main hall. This complex is massive. If they just wanted to cage a monster, they could have put it anywhere. Why waste the most prestigious hall on an outcast freak?
Zhang Cheng's brow furrowed as the pieces began to click together. He turned to Chu Kai with a sudden intensity.
Use your senses. Listen, is there anything moving inside that hall?
Chu Kai gave a slow shake of his head. He'd been monitoring the area since they arrived. Silence was the only answer from the main hall's depths. It wasn't entirely unexpected. If the reports of Huan's dismemberment were true, the creature might be in a dormant state, its life force as still and silent as a fungus. Zhang Cheng spun on his heel, striding toward the massive main gates of the central hall.
What do you think you're doing?
Chu Kai's voice was sharp with alarm as he watched Zhang Cheng reach for the heavy handles. He tried to intervene, but he was a second too slow. The doors were already yielding. The gates groaned with the weight of ages, a sound that clearly signaled they hadn't been disturbed in a very long time. Zhang Cheng's suspicion was confirmed. If this was a place of monthly sacrifice, these hinges would be silent. Beyond the threshold lay a void of absolute darkness, swallowing the light of their torches. Chu Kai pushed past, his enhanced vision cutting through the gloom to reveal the hall's interior. Shrouds of white silk hung from the ceiling, fluttering like ghosts in the sudden draft from the open doors. In the center of the vast space sat a single ornate coffin, surrounded by a legion of smaller, simpler ones.
Why? Why are there so many? Is the freak locked inside one of these?
Chu Kai's brow furrowed, the sheer number of coffins unsettling him.
No, it's worse than that.
Zhang Cheng's face had gone ghostly pale, his voice trembling as the truth hit him.
The one in that central coffin. That's the imperial noble consort. She's been dead for centuries. And these other coffins? They're for the people who were buried alive to serve her in the afterlife.
What? You're saying she's dead?
Chu Kai's eyes went wide with shock.
But if she's in that box, then who the hell is Chulai's mother?
Zhang Cheng turned his gaze toward the side hall where Lin Yi had gone, his jaw set in a grim line.
His mother isn't the consort. His mother is the one the books called Huan.
Reaching the outer perimeter of the side hall, Chu Lai reached out with both hands. He felt the cold, heavy texture of the massive gates but paused, his palms resting against the dark wood without pushing forward. He looked back over his shoulder at Lin Yi, his expression unreadable in the dim light.
Tell me, Lin Yi, in this moment, would you say your life is a happy one?
The question caught Lin Yi off guard. He stood there, frozen by the suddenness of the inquiry, his mind struggling to find any meaningful answer. Happy. The word felt foreign, almost absurd. Ever since he'd learned the truth about the freaks, his existence had been nothing but a desperate scramble for survival. He had walked the thin line between life and death more times than he could count. Was that supposed to be happiness? In a world without monsters, a student with his grades would have been looking forward to a promising university career far away from this nightmare. Chu Kai would have likely stayed close to home, choosing a local college just to remain by his sister's side. Zhang Cheng's path would have been even clearer. He would have aced his entrance exams and accepted a top-tier admission without a second thought. Lulin Hai would have been living out his dreams at his chosen school, enjoying the simple, unremarkable life he deserved. Even Chu Yun would be doing nothing more than shopping with friends during her school breaks, free from the shadow of death. If the world hadn't shattered, Uncle An would be celebrating the birth of his child by now. Every memory they shared, every trauma they endured, it was all the polar opposite of happiness.
More than 10 years. That's how long I've spent in this place. And in all that time, one thought has never left me.
Chu Lai murmured, almost to himself.
If I hadn't been taken, if I hadn't been dragged into this hole, would my life have meant something else?
It was a question that had haunted him for a decade. He was never quite sure if his arrival in this subterranean world was a blessing or a curse. Had he remained in the world above, he likely would have been just another piece of meat, livestock for the freaks to consume at their leisure. Yet, survival in this place came with its own heavy price. Even after all these years, the air here felt wrong, and every moment was tinged with a deep, persistent discomfort. The villagers had never truly accepted him. To them, he was an eternal outsider, someone to be shunned and looked down upon.
It was only when I met you that the pieces finally fell into place.
A flicker of something raw and desperate, longing mixed with a sharp edge of envy briefly crossed Chu Lai's features as he looked at Lin Yi. He envied Lin Yi's connection to others. Even in the face of certain death, Lin Yi wasn't alone. He had people who would fight for him, people who stood by his side. With a final decisive movement, Chu Lai put his weight into the heavy gates, pushing them open and stepping into the chamber beyond. The two children stood there, their eyes wide with confusion and terror. They had no idea why they were being led into this dark place, but their fear of the alternative kept them moving, following close behind. Lin Yi watched Chu Lai's back, a deep frown etching itself onto his forehead. There was something off about him. Something fundamentally different from the man he thought he knew. As they stepped deeper into the side hall, that sense of wrongness only intensified, crawling up Lin Yi's spine like a physical weight. The interior was draped in strips of fluttering red silk. They danced in the stagnant air, lending the vast chamber an almost ritualistic, alien quality that defied simple explanation. Lin Yi's gaze immediately sought out the sacrificial bath at the center of the hall. He expected to see the woman from before, still soaking in the water, but the pool was empty. At first, he tried to rationalize it. If she was truly human, as Chu Lai had claimed, it stood to reason she wouldn't spend her entire life submerged in a pool. Yet, the absence felt more like a warning than a simple change of routine. As their footsteps echoed closer to the dark waters, a jagged fragment of memory pierced through Lin Yi's concentration. He saw it clearly now, the scene from 2 nights ago. The villagers, their faces twisted with ritualistic zeal, dragging the bound captives and casting them into this very pool. They were sacrifices meant for Huan Huan. But Chu Lai had claimed the villagers processed their victims before feeding them to the beast. If Huan Huan was truly imprisoned in the main hall, what purpose did this side chamber pool serve? Why throw the offerings here first? The contradiction slammed into him like a physical blow. The logic didn't hold. The pieces didn't fit. In that heartbeat of clarity, the truth laid itself bare. Chu Lai had been weaving a web of deception from the very start. It wasn't a total fabrication. They had reached the underground palace just as he said they would. The framework of the plan was real. The poison was in the destination. Chu Lai's ultimate objective was something entirely different from the one he'd presented. Pure lies were fragile things, easily shattered by a single slip of the tongue or a crack in the performance. But a half-truth, a story built on a foundation of reality but twisted toward a hidden end. That was the most dangerous weapon of all, and Lin Yi had walked straight into its edge.
Chu Lai, stop this right now and tell me the truth.
Lin Yi's voice was a harsh bark as he seized Chu Lai's arm, his grip tightening with every second.
What are you really doing here? What is the point of all this?
A slow, unsettling smile spread across Chu Lai's face, one that didn't reach his cold eyes.
So you finally caught on. I suppose that's for the best. It saves me the trouble of trying to find the words to explain it to you.
A disturbance rippled outward from the center of the dark water. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, the woman emerged, her head breaking the surface like a pale ghost. She was scowling, her features twisted into a mask of restless irritability, her eyes searching the hall with a frantic, hungry energy.
Food! I need the food! Where have you hidden it? Bring it to me this instant. My precious Lai is starving.
Lie! The name hung in the heavy air, a question Lin Yi couldn't ignore. He looked back at Chu Lai, seeking some kind of explanation. Chu Lai met his gaze, his expression shifting into a bitter, hollow smile.
Do you see? To her, I was never a person. I was just a placeholder, a substitute for the one she lost.
The name wasn't his. It was a title bestowed upon him by a woman whose mind had shattered under the weight of her grief, a label she applied to any vessel that could temporarily fill the void left by her child. He was a toy, a living doll being treated with the same delusional affection a broken mother might give to a piece of wood. If he died, the name would simply pass to the next unfortunate soul. He was a disposable commodity in a game of perpetual mourning. The villagers knew the truth. They saw him for what he was, a favored pet whose status was as fragile as the woman's sanity. That was why they never truly accepted him. They knew that when this Chu Lai was gone, another would inevitably take his place. Because the real Chu Lai, the only one who truly mattered to her, had been dead for a very long time. Chu Lai wrenched his arm free from Lin Yi's grasp. Before anyone could react, he lunged forward, hoisting the small boy into the air with a single, powerful hand.
Here, mother, the offering you demanded has arrived.
With a sudden, violent heave, Chu Lai hurled the boy into the dark, waiting waters of the pool. The boy flailed wildly, his small face a mask of pure terror as he fought a losing battle against the dark surface, trying desperately to scramble back to safety. The little girl, ignoring the paralyzing fear that shook her entire frame, raced toward the water's edge. To her, this boy was the only family she had left. She reached out a trembling hand, her fingers straining to catch his. Lin Yi's teeth ground together. He raised his shotgun, the barrel tracking the woman as she began to glide through the water toward her prey. Her speed was unnatural, her movements lacking the fluid grace of a swimmer. Instead, it looked as if she were being propelled by something hidden beneath the surface, a force that pushed her through the water with terrifying efficiency. Lin Yi tightened his finger on the trigger. He wasn't sure if his aim was true, but even a near miss might buy the boy a few more seconds.
Don't bother. He's not as fragile as he looks.
Chu Lai said, his voice devoid of any concern.
Fate led me to these two for a reason. They aren't just children.
Is this what you wanted? To turn us all into sacrifices for your twisted game?
Lin Yi's voice was a harsh snarl of betrayal.
Hardly.
Chu Lai shook his head slowly.
My true goal is the annihilation of this village and the death of my mother.
You want to kill her?
The revelation left Lin Yi staggered. He could understand the hatred for the villagers, but the desire to murder the woman who had favored him, the one he supposedly loved, was a shift too sudden to process. A horrific change was taking hold of the boy in the water. His small body began to bloat unnaturally, his eyes bulging with an agonizing, frantic energy. Pale, jagged shards of bone began to erupt through his skin, his entire form swelling and twisting into something unrecognizable. He was becoming a monstrosity, a grotesque, pulsating mass of meat and bone that mirrored the horrific teenager they had encountered in the forest. The pieces finally clicked into place. These modified children were never meant to be cared for. They were living weapons, their biological triggers designed for one purpose: to destroy the very monsters that had created them. Chu Lai had brought them here to be his executioners. The boy's lower half had bloated into a grotesque mound of raw flesh. Jagged shards of white bone jutted out from the meat like a suit of armor, protecting the monstrosity within. A tangle of tentacles burst from the fleshy sphere. One slithered out with lightning speed, snaring the girl by the water's edge and yanking her into the pulsating mass. Lin Yi watched in silent horror, the grisly sight triggering memories of the four souls fused into a similar meatball back in the woods. This was the same hellish process of assimilation. As the girl disappeared into the boy's distorted form, his entire body began to shimmer and vanish from sight. Every trace of humanity had evaporated, replaced by a mindless, primal hunger for carnage. But the girl's power was a mere trick of the light invisibility that didn't erase their physical weight or presence. Even as they faded into nothingness, the water betrayed them, churning with ripples and sinking under the invisible weight of their stance. The woman didn't slow down for a second. The nightmare unfolding before her eyes didn't even make her blink. She charged into the empty space where the water dipped, slamming into something unseen. A crazed light filled her eyes as she lunged forward, her teeth sinking deep into a hidden slab of meat. She tore a ragged, blood-soaked chunk away. Without a single chew, she forced the raw flesh down her throat, swallowing it in one violent gulp.
That's no human. Is she the Huan?
Lin Yi's voice shook with pure terror. No person could act with such savage, inhuman cruelty.
No!
Chu Lai watched the carnage with a chilling, detached gaze.
I wasn't lying to you earlier. My mother isn't one of those freaks. She truly is human. Or at least, she was.
She was! The words sent a fresh wave of confusion through Lin Yi's mind. What kind of past could lead to this? Lin Yi's mind spun with unanswered questions, but the boy in the lake wasn't waiting for an explanation. He started to claw his way back. Realizing the water only exposed his position, he tried to scramble out of the pool to regain his tactical advantage. Lin Yi wondered why the girl's power couldn't mask the water around them. Was it a limit of her reach, or a failure of her concentration? Perhaps she was already gone, her fading spirit clinging to one final desperate instinct to keep her companion safe. Just as the boy reached for the dry ground, the water exploded with a sickening splash. Dozens of brownish, fleshy appendages surged upward, twisting through the air like a pit of starving vipers. The sight sent a jolt of recognition through Lin Yi. These were the same hideous meat tubes that had ambushed the villagers on the way to this tomb. The tubes coiled tightly around the boy's invisible frame, lifting the woman high above the churning water. Below her waist, she was no longer human. She was fused into a writhing, pulsing nest of those vile, fleshy pipes.
What in God's name is that thing?
Lin Yi stood frozen, unable to process the monstrosity rising from the pool. As the woman swallowed her gruesome meal, a ripple traveled down one of the tubes. The meat was being pumped through her body to some unseen destination.
His mother. She was the wet nurse for the Huan once.
Chu Lai's voice was laced with a strange, complex bitterness, a resentment that felt far more personal than his hatred for the village. It was the kind of deep-seated grudge that could only grow from a twisted, broken love.
But that time is over. Now, Mother has become the mouth of Huan.
Chu Lai had been selective with the truth. He described the Huan as a limbless, headless thing that needed to be fed. He'd said the villagers brought it food, but he had omitted the most horrific detail, the living conduit through which it actually fed.
Do you honestly believe a woman of her standing could ever love a child that wasn't hers?
Chu Lai's words cut through the air as the scene shifts to the cold, silent halls of the ancient palace. The imperial noble consort had known the moment she saw him. This thing, this Huan, it was a replacement, an interloper in her own nursery. She hadn't struck it down immediately, only because its face was so disturbingly human. For a fleeting moment, even she doubted her own eyes. And without proof, a single mistake would be her ruin. The Empress was waiting for any excuse to charge her with the murder of a royal prince. But the consort was blind to the true danger. She had no idea that the creature in the cradle was nearly impossible to kill. In the end, blood didn't matter to her as much as power. If this monster could secure her position, she would play the part of the doting mother. It was a gamble built on ambition. She never dreamed that the thing she was nurturing was something far beyond the realm of humanity. Huan's growth was explosive, fueled by the wet nurse's care and a diet that defied nature. The disaster was only a matter of time. A hunger took hold of the creature, a bottomless, screaming void that no normal food could ever fill. Then, the screaming began. One by one, the servants attending to the nursery started to vanish. Yet through all the carnage and the blood-stained silk, the wet nurse remained untouched. To the monster, she was the only one who mattered.
She was his nurse for years. In her heart, she grew to see that monster as her real flesh and blood. And that thing, it looked at her with the same devotion.
Chulai's hatred for Huan was a cold, jagged thing. He was nothing but a shadow, a temporary fix for a mother who had already given her soul to a beast. To her, the real Chulai was the monstrosity in the nursery. Everything else was just a convenient lie. His resentment for the woman was even deeper. He hated her for the crumbs of affection she threw him, knowing all the while that he was a placeholder. As the years passed, even that faint warmth began to wither. Her eyes grew distant, her touch colder. He knew the cycle. Soon, another Chulai would be chosen. Someone younger, someone fresher. And when his replacement arrived, he would be cast aside. He would become nothing more than a meal for the woman he had once called mother. The way she looked at Lin Yi confirmed his darkest fears. Lin Yi was young, his spirit unbroken. To her, he was the perfect upgrade, the next iteration of her son. She had never seen Chulai as a person, only as a temporary asset, and that was why he had finally decided to burn it all down.
But why did you drag us into this?
Lin Yi's brow furrowed, his confusion deepening. If Chulai wanted to end his own suffering, why involve outsiders?
I've told you already. You're the ones fate led me to. Do you really think I haven't tried to stop this nightmare before? Year after year, I've fought.
Chulai's past was a cycle of failed rebellions. He'd sabotaged their grisly rituals, turned his blade on the woman, and even rallied against the village. Each time, he was crushed. But death wasn't an escape. Every time his life was extinguished, he woke up right back where he started at the beginning of his own doomed plan. The infinite rebirth had shattered his sanity. He craved the finality of the grave, a peace that was always just out of reach. To be trapped in a loop where even suicide was impossible, it was a torment far worse than anything the monsters could devise. Just as he was about to surrender to the madness, the threads appeared. Thin, glowing strands of light began to sprout from his own flesh. He spent an eternity deciphering their meaning, learning to read the language of the threads of destiny. Guided by those shimmering lines of fate, he began to weave this final, desperate plan. Even in his monster state, he was no match for the nightmare rising from the pool. He wasn't just fighting a monster. He was up against a human conduit fused with the power of an ancient species freak. Lin Yi didn't hesitate. He leveled his weapon, his finger tightening on the trigger. Was it the hours of training, the raw instinct to protect those children, or just a miracle of luck? Even without his enhanced senses, his aim was perfect. The bullet found its mark, striking the woman's head with explosive force. Her skull shattered into a spray of bone and gray matter, her body jerking back from the impact. But the victory lasted only a heartbeat. Thick, wet, fleshy sprouts erupted from the ragged wound, knitting bone and skin back together with terrifying speed. Lin Yi's blood ran cold as Chu Lai's warning echoed in his mind. The vitality of a freak like Huan Huan was absolute. You couldn't kill them with bullets, you could only starve the life out of them. Seizing the brief window while the woman recovers, the small boy launches a desperate counterattack. His form flickers and vanishes from sight. Lin Yi can no longer see the boy himself, only the violent evidence of his unseen movements. The thick meat tubes coiled around the boy suddenly constrict, and he lunges toward the woman with ferocious speed. Grisly wounds erupt across the woman's flesh, torn open by jagged bone spurs that seem to explode from within the boy's own body. Invisible tentacles sprout from the child, snaking around the woman's head and squeezing until the bone begins to buckle and deform.
Ha! Ha ha ha!
Chu Lai breaks into a jagged laugh. Though his lips are curled into a smile, the sound is heavy with a bitter, bottomless sorrow.
Do it! Kill her quickly! Once she is gone, Huan Wud will perish too. When they are both dead, I will finally be free.
The woman's head is crushed like a piece of overripe fruit under the immense pressure. Blood sprays across the invisible tentacles, painting a grotesque, hovering silhouette of the boy in the air. But a being merged with the ancient entity is not so easily ended. The horror refuses to subside. Disgusting meat sprouts begin to writhe and knit together. Before their eyes, her head begins to reform once more. Unbridled fury distorts the woman's features. Beneath the churning surface of the pool, more meat tubes surge upward, making the water appear to boil with a dark, predatory intent. The tubes find their mark, snaring the jagged bone spurs that protrude from the boy's distorted frame. With a sickening, violent snap, the tubes wrench the bones free from the woman's own body, discarding them as if they were nothing. The severed bone fragments drift to the surface. The tubes do not relent. Instead, they drive deep into the boy's bloated, pulsating flesh like serrated daggers.
My child, he is so hungry. He needs to be fed.
She looks utterly unhinged, her once regal hair a matted mess. Drenched in a mixture of blood and spray, she resembles a vengeful ghost rising from the blackest abyss. The tips of the meat tubes split open, revealing inner walls lined with razor-sharp hooks. They lunge forward with mechanical precision. The moment they touch the boy, the hooks clamp shut, digging deep into his flesh and anchoring him in place. A massive bulge appears at the end of the tubes, sucking the life force and nutrients from his body and transporting them rapidly toward the bottom of the pool. The woman throws herself at the boy. Even if she cannot see him clearly, the meat tubes provide her with a direct path to her prey. She opens her mouth, gnawing at his flesh with a ravenous, animalistic greed. She swallows the torn, bloody chunks whole, not even pausing to chew as she feeds the entity within her. The meat tubes connected to her lower body pulsate with every mouthful. She is nothing more than a biological conduit for Huan Huan. Despite his regenerative gifts, the boy is no match for the ancient horror. In the end, he is still just a child facing a cosmic predator. Stripped of his reason, the boy relies on feral survival instincts. Without his invisibility, his clumsy brute force attacks would have never stood a chance.
How the hell are we supposed to kill this freak?
Lin Yi gritted his teeth, his jaw tight with frustration as he turned a burning glare toward Chu Lai.
I haven't a clue.
Chu Lai responds with a thin, mocking smirk, showing no trace of the horror unfolding behind them.
But in the end, it doesn't really matter.
He seems utterly detached, as if the life and death before him were merely scenes in a play he has seen 1,000 times too many. Perhaps the years spent in this tomb have finally hollowed him out. leaving only a warped shell where a soul used to be.
You are the ones fate chose for me to find. As long as I deliver you here, everything will fall into place. So, set your mind at ease. We only need to wait. Destiny will arrange the most fitting conclusion for us all.
Wait. Wait for what? Lin Yi's mind reels at the cold-blooded calculation in the man's voice. It was bad enough that these children were experimented on. Now Chu Lai is treating them as nothing more than expendable tools to bait a monster. Lin Yi can't stomach it. He levels his weapon, finger hovering over the trigger. But the woman is draped so closely over the boy that a direct shot would surely claim both their lives. Lin Yi's brow furrows in concentration. He shifts his aim, focusing his sights on the massive meat tubes that bridge the gap between the woman and the entity below. He steadies his breathing, then pulls the trigger. An energy blast rips through the chamber, vaporizing nearly half of the pulsating meat tubes in a flash of searing light. Lin Yi hopes to sever their connection, but the creature's recovery is terrifyingly swift. Fresh meat sprouts erupt from the charred remains, knitting the tubes back together in seconds.
Yes, that's it. Do it again.
Chu Lai watches from the sidelines, his excitement growing into a fever pitch as he cheers on the violence.
You are a child of destiny as well. Strike her. Only through her death can I be released from this torment.
Son of a bitch.
Lin Yi spits the curse under his breath. If it weren't for the man's temporal loop ability, Lin Yi would have gladly put a bullet in his skull long ago. The woman in the pool snaps her head toward Lin Yi. The energy blast has finally drawn her full, murderous attention. The remaining meat tubes in the water elongate, lashing out at him like whips of raw, hungry flesh. Yet, they are not as fast as he feared. Whether due to the disrupted sacrifice or a limited diet, they lack the sickening speed of the flowery vines he faced before. Taking advantage of the woman's brief distraction, the small boy begins to thrash in the water, his invisible form fighting for every inch of progress. The meat tubes coiled around him tighten their grip, but he ignores the pain, dragging himself with desperate strength toward the edge of the pool. He knows he cannot win this struggle. To stay in the water is to embrace certain death. Even with his mind shattered by madness, the primal drive for survival takes hold, forcing him to abandon the futile battle. If he can only reach dry ground, she will lose the ability to track his movements through the ripples in the water.
Don't you dare retreat. Keep fighting. Keep going. You are the one fate has delivered to me. You cannot run. Fight. Fight.
Shut the hell up! Lin Yi snaps, his patience finally at its limit. He deftly dodges a lashing meat tube and lunges at Chu Lai with explosive speed. He slams a heavy fist into the man's face, the impact throwing Chu Lai backward. Chu Lai offers no resistance. He doesn't even raise a hand to protect himself. Even as he crumples to the stone floor, he continues to laugh with a chilling, hollow joy. To a man who has died and returned 1,000 times, such physical pain is trivial, almost meaningless. He would endure any agony, suffer any humiliation, if it meant finally bringing his eternal nightmare to a close. Lin Yi grinds his teeth, his anger momentarily replaced by a sickening realization. Chu Lai's current state is a mirror to his own potential future. If he hadn't crossed paths with Chu Kai, would he too have withered into this? Trapped in a hopeless loop of death and rebirth, until his mind fractured and his heart turned into something twisted and unrecognizable? Lin Yi shakes off the heavy thoughts. There is no time for introspection. His only priority is rescuing the 2 children from the pool. Only then can he hope to escape this hall. Trying to kill an immortal freak in a head-on battle is a fool's errand. He needs to find another way out. But before any plan can be executed, he must ensure his own immediate survival. Once more, Lin Yi takes aim, focusing the energy of his weapon on the vulnerable junction where the woman's torso merges with the mass of meat tubes. The energy erupts in a blinding flash, tearing through the connection and shredding the meat tubes once again. He reloads with practiced, lightning speed, already preparing to deliver a second, finishing blow. But the horror is relentless! The enemy's regenerative speed is simply too great for him to overcome. As the jagged wound begins its sickening process of knitting back together, a heavy, reverberating thud echoes through the chamber. The massive stone doors to the side hall are kicked open with violent force, slamming against the walls. A sharp whistle cuts through the damp air. A single arrow streaks across the room, a blur of motion in the flickering light. The projectile thuds home, burying itself deep within the very wound Lin Yi had just opened in the woman's side. This time, the impossible regeneration falters and stops. The flesh around the arrow begins to blacken and rot, spreading with unnatural speed. A new player has entered the game, and the tide of the battle has suddenly shifted.
Chu Kai?
The projectile whizzing through the air triggered a primitive survival instinct in Lin Yi, his heart hammering against his ribs. His gaze whipped toward the doorway just as Chu Kai slammed through the entrance with the force of a gale. A wave of relief and gratitude washed over Lin Yi, seeing his friend risk everything to find him.
Chu Kai, I'm okay.
But the boy didn't stop. He sprinted past Lin Yi as if he were a ghost, his focus locked onto something else. Chu Kai stood over the crumpled form of Chu Lai, his eyes burning with a lethal fury. He lashed out with a vicious kick, his voice dripping with bile.
You pathetic waste of skin. If you have a death wish, go find a hole and rot in it. Don't you dare drag the rest of us into your grave. I have to get out of here. I can't leave little Yun alone in this world.
Lin Yi stood frozen, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. It wasn't heroics. It was the raw, panicked terror of a brother who couldn't bear to leave his sister behind. Zhang Cheng stepped into the room moments later, but he didn't even look at Lin Yi. His clinical gaze was fixed entirely on the monstrous figure submerged in the pool. Zhang Cheng clicked his tongue in a mix of disgust and scientific curiosity, his head tilting as he studied the anomaly.
Incredible! A genuine fusion between a freak and a human host. Our previous encounters were just crude grafts, unstable bodies forced to accept foreign organs. That rejection is what drove those failures into a mindless frenzy. But this, is it a matter of synchronicity, a genetic overlap, or perhaps a mutual willingness to merge? The possibilities are endless. I'd give anything to see what's happening under that skin.
Lin Yi's expression soured. Between the murderous rage and the cold scientific detachment, it seemed he was the least interesting thing in the room.
How the hell did you find this place?
Lin Yi forced himself to focus, the lines of concern deep on his forehead. Every second they spent in this tomb felt like a gamble with their lives.
We came to get you back.
Zhang Cheng gave a brief summary of their trek through the darkness, his eyes flickering toward the groaning form of Chu Lai on the floor.
Time to go. Leave that traitor where he lies. I've already figured out the exit. The exit? You found it?
The news hit Lin Yi like a jolt of electricity. He had thought they were buried alive.
Technically, I know how to force the hidden path to manifest again. Tell me, do you have any idea what kind of entity this mirage actually is?
Lin Yi could only offer a silent, confused shake of his head. A sharp cry of pain echoed from the pool. The woman's features were distorted, her body racked with tremors of pure agony. The crossbow wound was a grotesque sight. Instead of clotting, the flesh was liquefying into a black putrid sludge that devoured the surrounding skin. The bolt hadn't been dipped in simple venom. It carried a necrotic slurry harvested from the chests of the mutant birds on the surface. The villagers of the hair snail colony had spoken of the rot with religious fear. Once it touched a wound, it would never stop eating until the victim was nothing but bone. Zhang Cheng had used his mantis wolf pets to stockpile the foul substance, sealing the putrescent meat in airtight jars for future use. He'd been forced to discard most of it when the smell became too pungent, even for his clinical sensibilities. This wasn't a lethal blow, merely a horrific distraction. Soon, the creature would realize the only way to survive was to excise the rotting mass from its own body. Back in the main hall, the presence of the coffin had led Zhang Cheng to believe the entity known as the Mirage was contained within the woman in the pool. Lin Yi had followed that same line of logic, convinced that the monster was merely a parasite lurking at the bottom of the hot spring, bound to its human host. But the frantic sprint to the side hall had allowed the pieces of the puzzle to fall into place. Zhang Cheng had synthesized every anomaly they'd encountered into a single, horrifying truth.
I was wrong. That woman, she isn't the Mirage.
A shadow of pure dread crossed Zhang Cheng's face, his eyes sweeping across the vast, echoing chamber.
The Mirage, it isn't a resident of this place. It is this place. This entire subterranean world is the creature.
What did you just say?
The magnitude of the revelation sent a shiver of existential terror down Lin Yi's spine. Even at a fraction of the city's size above, the sheer biological mass required to form an entire underground ecosystem was beyond comprehension.
Are you saying we're literally inside its digestive system? This entire world, it's just one giant belly?
Lin Yi's mind flashed back to the grotesque flesh tubes in the village, the way they burrowed deep into the earth like hungry roots. It all clicked. A single pool could never support a network that reached all the way to the surface. But if the ground they stood on was a living organ, then the tubes were simply extensions of its own anatomy, reaching up to feed. The spongy, yielding texture of the floor wasn't stone or soil. It was the soft, resilient tissue of a stomach lining. The side hall wasn't just a room. It was the site of a massive, unhealed wound on the Mirage's inner body. The woman in the pool was merely a lure, a biological gateway. She was the mouth of the beast. As for the fate of anything consumed by that mouth, the thoughts were too dark to dwell on. Whether it possessed multiple chambers for slow digestion or simply dissolved its prey into raw nutrients was a mystery. They were facing an apex predator that defied every biological law they knew. A sudden, uncomfortable thought occurred to Lin Yi as he mentally retraced their steps through the subterranean tunnels.
The tunnel we used to get here. If this is the stomach, then that means...
Exactly. We entered through the Mirage's posterior. Shut up. I don't want to hear the rest of that sentence.
Lin Yi cut him off before the clinical description could get any more graphic, a look of pure revulsion on his face. Zhang Cheng merely gave a dismissive shrug, his mind already moving back to the biological mechanics of the ecosystem.
The people in the village aren't worshippers. They're parasites, living in a perfect, albeit disgusting symbiosis with the entity. They provide the meals, and in exchange, the Mirage grants them a perverted form of immortality. But forget Chu Lai's nonsense about eating sacred meat. It's much more efficient than that. Those umbilical tubes pump a life-extending serum directly into their veins. It likely functions like a synthetic hormone cocktail. I haven't been able to isolate the compound yet. I'd give anything to bring a fresh sample back to a lab.
The entire narrative of the sacrificial preparation had been a fabrication designed to mask the truth of their parasitic existence. The villagers weren't standing in the forest to meditate. They were tethered to the earth, receiving their daily dosage of longevity through the roots of the beast. Even the bioluminescent moss was part of the creature's communication network. It was a simple biological signal. When the Mirage secreted a specific pheromone, the moss would darken, signaling the villagers to move. The samples Zhang Cheng had collected continued to glow because they were severed from the central nervous system of the monster, frozen in their on state.
We're leaving right now. This is no longer a scouting mission, it's a survival run.
Zhang Cheng's voice was sharp, cutting through the heavy air of the chamber like a blade.
The mirage didn't keep those villagers alive out of mercy. They were its workforce, the ones responsible for bringing in the harvest. But with the sacrifice disrupted, the entity is going to get hungry, and a starving freak is a mindless engine of consumption.
For generations, the hair snail colony had bought their survival with the lives of others, maintaining a delicate balance within the beast's belly. Now that the supply line was severed, the mirage would turn its digestive attention to the only nutrients left, the living organism still trapped inside its gut.
I don't plan on being part of its next meal.
But the children, we can't just leave them here like this.
Zhang Cheng offered a slow, cynical shake of his head, his eyes devoid of pity.
Drop it! They were gone the moment the fusion began. The boundary between human and freak is a jagged, unstable mess. Those botched experiments we saw earlier are the only possible outcome. Any shred of humanity they retained was likely artificial, sustained only by chemical suppressants from their masters. Turning them back? That's a fairy tale. They're already part of the machine.
The image of the boy fused into the wall of flesh, his eyes begging for the sweet release of death, burned in Lin Yi's mind, a horrific proof of Zhang Cheng's cold logic.
You're not going anywhere. You can't just abandon me here.
Chu Lai's voice rose to a frenzied shriek as he overheard their plan. He clawed his way up from the stone, his eyes wild and bloodshot as he lunged toward Lin Yi.